I'm Chef Frank, this is Protocooks, and today we're making chicken cutlets. Chef Frank, what are chicken cutlets and how do you make them? I'm going to answer both of your questions. A cutlet is usually a piece of meat that is pounded out thin and then breaded and fried. A lot of cultures have them, Germany, Austria it's a schnitzel, in Italy it's a cotoletta or a milanesa, same thing like in Mexico, they call it a milanesa. And basically it's a simple pounded out piece of meat, breaded and fried. Today we're going to make chicken cutlets, and I make these quite often. My family loves them. They're simple to make, they're a little time consuming, but they're delicious, and I always make more than I need. It's usually I make enough for like 2 dinners because we share, and then we have sandwiches the next day, and they're just delicious and super versatile. You can do a lot of different things with them. For our chicken cutlets, I have about 2 to 3 pounds of chicken breast. I'm going to trim them up and show you how to flatten them out. Eggs, all-purpose flour, breadcrumbs, and I like plain breadcrumbs. I don't get Italian seasoning. Once in a while I'll put cheese in these, but for the most part they're just plain breadcrumbs. I'll season them up with salt and pepper. Vegetable oil or a mild olive oil, salt and pepper. First thing we're going to do is prepare the chicken breast. Let's talk about a few things that I have in order to do this job right. One of the first things I have is a separate plastic cutting board. I don't really like to cut raw chicken on my beautiful wooden cutting board. It's hard to clean. I don't like to put this under the water. So I bought this at a restaurant supply store. I'll put a link to something similar in the description. But I like to have a plastic board that I can scrub really well and sanitize in the dishwasher. I have a knife. I have a meat mallet. The meat mallet has 2 sides, right? It has a flat side and a spiky side. Now the spiky side is for pieces of meat that aren't tender. So if you're gonna do like a chicken fried steak, that piece of meat isn't tender. And you wanna use the spiky side to hit it and get the fibers of the muscles kind of more tender. Whereas this chicken breast we're doing today is super tender already, and we're gonna use the flat side. The first thing that I wanna do is take my chicken, and the breasts that I have are huge. Nowadays the chicken breasts are gigantic. I do have one normal size. This to me is a normal size. I like those, but sometimes I can only find the big ones. So this is what I do first. What I'm gonna do first is take off any fat. If there's little pieces of fat or cartilage, I try and get those off. I want a very clean chicken breast. So I take off all the fat, and there's like a little piece of like muscle here and tendon. I try and take that out. And then what I'm gonna do is cut this into a usable size. So I like to just place my hand on top. I'm pressing down lightly just to kind of give the breast some shape, and I'm slicing into thin slices, okay? Press down lightly, kind of a nice sawing motion, okay? And that's what I do to start the process. There's 2 ways I use to pound these cutlets out. And I'm sure there's more than 2 ways, but these are the ways that I've found are most efficient and what I've used throughout my career. The first one is using plastic wrap. Now, this is a little bit more wasteful, but I've used it many times. Is you get a piece of plastic wrap, right? And you take a piece of your chicken, and then you put another piece of plastic wrap on top. And you have to make sure that there's room around this, because the chicken breast is going to grow when we pound it. Now, again, I'm not using the spikes because this is tender. I'm just going to use the flat side, and I'm just going to kind of hit it fairly firm, making sure that I don't hit with any corners. I want to make sure it hits nice and flat. When you hit it with corners, you get dents and rips. So I'm just going to kind of go around in a circle until I get this fairly thin. I don't want it super, super thin. I just want it about half the original thickness because if it's too thin, then it cooks too quick and it's a little dry. Fair amount of pressure. You don't want to be lightly tapping. You want to make sure that you hit it, right? So you'll see the chicken spreads out, and that's it. That's how you pound out a chicken breast. Here's the second method that I like to use. I like to get a Ziploc bag. And there's a hinge on this side. So what I'll do with the Ziploc, I will cut off the top and I will cut off the sides. So now I have a hinge here. I take my chicken cutlet or my chicken piece, and I can reuse this multiple times. Flatten it out, right? Take the chicken cutlet off, nice and thin. So I like to use the Ziploc method just because I'm getting more than one use and I'm not using as much plastic. If you don't have a mallet, this mallet is about 10, 15 bucks. I'll put a link to it. You can use a saute pan. Just remember, keep it flat. All right, that's it. Next thing we're gonna do is bread these cutlets. Standing breading procedure is basically a common language that we all have, that when you bread something, flour, then eggs, then breadcrumbs. Now, does it have to be breadcrumbs? Not necessarily. You could bread things with whatever you want. You want to use Cheerios, you want to use Captain Crunch. Of course I go to cereals. Why did I go to cereals? But you can bread things in anything you want. But what you want to do is always start with flour and then eggs. The flour and then the eggs basically make a glue on your cutlet that holds the breadcrumbs on. So I have my cutlets over here on the side. I have a sheet tray with parchment to collect my finished breaded cutlets. And what I'm gonna do is season my flour and my breadcrumbs. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of kosher salt here and a little bit of kosher salt there. I'm gonna put a little of black pepper in both my flour and my breadcrumbs. Okay, and I'm just gonna mix it up. Now, here's one of the key things you need to remember when you are breading cutlets or you're breading anything. I have a dry hand and a wet hand. My right hand is my dry hand. I don't go dipping into the breadcrumbs and the egg with the same hand, because what happens is you get fat fingers, and eventually the breading starts to crust up your fingers and you look like kind of like Mickey Mouse with white gloves on. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you keep a dry hand and a wet hand. I have my wet hand is my left. My wet hand drops this chicken cutlet into the flour, and now this is dry. Right? It's not wet anymore. So my wet hand drops the cutlet into the flour. I do 2 or 3 at a time. Once I have flour on the cutlet, it's not really wet anymore, so I can use my dry hand. Okay. Drop all that in. Again, my dry hand is in my breadcrumbs. I want to make sure that my cutlets are well coated in the egg and make sure that there's no lumps of flour. You can see right here, there's a little bit of a lump of flour. And what I do is just try and break those up. You don't want too many lumps of flour. You can shake off your cutlet a little after you put in the flour better. And then what I let this do is I let it drain, tap it on the side once or twice. Okay. And then I bread my cutlet. I like to tap it a little, give it a tap, make sure the crumbs are sticking. And that's it. That's my first breaded cutlet. Let my cutlet drain off. Try and get as much egg off as you can. And then bury it in the breadcrumbs. Give it a light tap. Make sure it's coated really well. Okay? And then onto my tray. One more. This will make a mess in your kitchen, I guarantee it. I always make a little bit of a mess with this, and it's just part of the plan. So plan for it, okay? Bread it, little tap so my breadcrumbs stay on. Make sure there's no wet spots, okay? Time to fry. Okay, frying in and of itself is a whole other video, a whole other lesson. I'm gonna give you a few pointers on this one, and we'll cover deep frying and pan frying later on in another video. But today we're basically pan frying this, which means that it's pretty much submerged in a shallow pan. It's not a deep pan, it's a shallow pan, and the product or the chicken cutlets are gonna be submerged. A couple things you wanna think of. When you're frying, if you put your chicken cutlets in the oil and nothing happens, that means you're gonna have greasy chicken cutlets. When you put your chicken cutlets in the oil, you want them to start bubbling. And basically what that means is that the water inside the chicken cutlet is bubbling out and making everything crisp. The oil is not getting in. So you want to have the right temperature. And I'm shooting for about 350, 375. So I have a thermometer. If you don't have a thermometer, get one. But 350, 375. What also happens is when we add product to the oil, or we add our chicken cutlets to the oil, the temperature is going to drop a little. If I say 350, I'll go to 375. Once I put the chicken in there, it's going to go down a little. Don't overcrowd your pan. Don't put too much in there. Don't stuff everything in there. 2 cutlets in here will be perfect. I have a tray with paper towels to drain on. I have salt because when these come out of the oil hot, I'm going to season them up. And I have a pair of tongs. You can use a spider or something else to get these out. I find tongs to be the best. So let's check my oil. My oil is close to about, what is it? We're about 350 right now, 360, okay? And the oil temperature is important because if the oil is too hot, you're gonna get the outside burning before the chicken is cooked. And if it's too cold, it's gonna get greasy. So you can also test by taking a piece of a breadcrumb, you drop the breadcrumb in, and you see how fast it gets brown. You can see it's not browning really fast. It's taking its time. So that's good. 350, 375 is perfect, okay? So this is what we're gonna do. The first thing we're gonna do is take our cutlet. I have a big one here. When I drop it, I'm gonna drop it in away from myself. When I drop it, I drop away. If you drop it in like this, the oil's gonna splash on you. Always drop away from yourself. One more time. I could probably fit 2 cutlets in here. Drop it away from myself. And there's nothing to be done now. You let it cook. You see that I have a lot of bubbles here. That's perfect. I wanna see a bunch of bubbles. That means that the liquid or the water is being driven out and it's making everything crisp, and my cutlets are gonna be nice and juicy. I fry all the cutlets now. Gonna fry them, put them on my tray, season them up, and either eat them now or I'll cool them, put them in the fridge for leftovers tomorrow. But these cutlets freeze really well too, okay? I can see I'm getting some nice golden brown. I'm gonna give them a turn. Now I use tongs. A lot of people don't wanna use tongs because they'll scrape the breading off, but I'm usually just using the tongs as a flipping thing. I'm not really grabbing too tightly and scraping off the crust. So I'm just kind of like using it as a flipper, but you can see they're bubbling away nicely. I'm gonna put my oil over, my salt over here. If you don't have paper towels, you can always put a rack on here and drain them on a rack. But for the most part, if we've done our job right, they're not gonna be oily. Okay? It only takes about 3 to 4 minutes per, but look at that. I think we're done. Look at that cutlet, it's beautiful. I put it on my tray, both sides, just dab off any excess oil. Okay, I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of salt now. When I season, I go really high up, and you really want your oil to come back up to temperature, right? What happens is, if you put your chicken cutlets in, if the oil hasn't come back to temperature, not only are they a little greasy, a lot of times you'll see this coating starts to come off because the chicken starts to cook in steam and it blows the coating off. So let's give this a few minutes to come back to temperature, and we'll continue frying. Last of the cutlets are done. Let's take them out, give them a good drain. Quick little season, shut our power off. Let's plate them and taste them. So it's time to taste. One thing I want to point out is that these cutlets are super, super simple. I didn't really put anything but salt and pepper in them. Now, you can kind of jazz them up whatever way you want, but depending on what you put into the mixture, you got to watch when you fry. Because if you're going to put stuff in like maybe garlic powder or paprika, they might fry up a little darker. So let's give it a taste. Okay. That was a big bite. Really nice. The outside is golden and crispy. The inside is tender and moist. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up, like, subscribe. Hit the little bell to get notifications. We try and do a video a week. We have merch down in the description down below. Need Salt t-shirts, I Control the Salt t-shirts. If you want to correspond with us via mail, we have a P.O. box. The address is down below. We also have a Patreon account, and I want to thank all my patrons for supporting us. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Chef Frank. This is Proto Cooks. Have a good one.